Welcome to Future Epoch, where we learn more about our world. In the year 2001, a small number of people in Silicon Valley and on Wall Street were convinced they had seen the future. They had glimpsed a secret invention, one so significant that its creator believed it would reshape cities, transform human movement, and make the automobile obsolete. One of the most respected venture capitalists in America predicted it would be bigger than the internet. One of the world's most celebrated technologists called it as important as the personal computer. The inventor himself believed it would reach sales of 10,000 units per week within a year of launch. When the device was finally revealed to the world, it was a two-wheeled electric scooter that cost $5,000, was banned from most pavements, weighed 65 pounds, and traveled no faster than 12 miles per hour. This is the story of the Segway. The Segway personal transporter, known simply as the PT, was not a bad machine. It was, by most accounts, genuinely impressive engineering. A system of gyroscopes, tilt sensors, and electric motors kept the rider upright and moving with no conventional throttle, no handlebars in the traditional sense, and no mechanical brakes. You leaned forward and it moved. You leaned back and it slowed. It was intuitive, quiet, and clean. The problem was not the machine itself. The problem was what the people behind it believed it would become. Dean Kamen had spent his career solving problems most engineers considered too difficult or too obscure to bother with. In his 20s, he'd invented a portable insulin pump. Later, he created the iBot, a revolutionary motorized wheelchair capable of climbing stairs and balancing on two wheels, allowing its user to rise to eye level with a standing person. Kamen held hundreds of patents and had built a reputation as one of America's most inventive engineers. In the late 1990s, he turned his attention to a problem that had troubled city planners and urban thinkers for decades: the gap between walking and driving. Cars were too large, too polluting, and too expensive for short journeys within dense cities. Walking was too slow. Bicycles were practical but imperfect for many riders and many conditions. Kamen believed a compact, self-balancing electric vehicle could fill that gap, and that if it worked well enough, cities would reorganize themselves around it. Development proceeded in secrecy throughout the late 1990s and into 2001 under the internal codenames Ginger and IT. Kamen showed early prototypes to a carefully chosen group of influential figures, including the venture capitalist John Doerr, Amazon founder Jeff Bezos, and Apple's Steve Jobs. Their reactions were extraordinary. Doerr, who had backed Google and Amazon at the earliest stages of their existence, told colleagues the device would be bigger than the internet. Jobs, not a man given to excessive praise, called it as significant as the personal computer and pressed Kamen to refine the design and simplify its aesthetic. In January 2001, a book proposal written by journalist Steve Kemper, who had been granted unusual inside access to the Segway project, began circulating online. The internet reacted with intense and sustained curiosity. The world was waiting for whatever IT turned out to be. The official launch came on December 3, 2001, during a live appearance on Good Morning America. The curtain came back. Kamen glided out on a two-wheeled machine. Cameras flashed. The audience applauded. The reaction from the wider media was not what anyone had anticipated. Rather than awe, much of the response was confusion, skepticism, and a tone that bordered on mockery. People had spent months imagining something that would change everything. What they saw looked, to many of them, like an expensive toy. The Segway faced problems that no amount of engineering ingenuity could resolve, because they were not engineering problems. The first was price. At launch, the Segway cost approximately $5,000. For a device that traveled at 12 miles per hour on flat ground, required regular recharging, and could not be taken on public transport, that was a figure almost no ordinary consumer was prepared to spend. Kamen had imagined a mass-market product. What he had built was priced at the level of professionals and enthusiasts. The second was regulation. Cities across the United States, and later around the world, simply did not know what to do with it. The Segway was too fast and too large for most pavements. It was too slow and too small for roads. San Francisco and New York prohibited it from footpaths. Federal legislation was required before it could be legally ridden on public land in many American states at all. Rather than slipping neatly into the existing urban landscape, the Segway forced a legal and political negotiation that most municipalities had neither the time nor the appetite for. The third problem was harder to define, but may have been the most consequential of all. The Segway required its rider to stand upright on a specific machine, in public, at a pace not much faster than walking, surrounded by pedestrians. It invited stares. It projected a very particular image. And that image, fairly or not, became a recurring punchline in popular culture almost immediately after launch. The markets where the Segway did find genuine acceptance were not the markets Carmen had imagined. Police departments purchased fleets for patrol work. Security companies deployed them in airports, warehouses, and large commercial campuses. Tour operators in major cities discovered that tourists, freed from any concern about looking self-conscious, were enthusiastic riders. Disney World adopted them for staff. The United States Postal Service trialed them on delivery routes. These were real applications with real value. They were not a revolution in personal transportation. Sales never came close to Cayman's projections. He had spoken publicly about reaching 10,000 units per week. By most estimates, the company sold fewer than 30,000 units in its first 5 years of production. Total lifetime sales across nearly 2 decades are believed to have reached somewhere in the range of 140,000 units. For context, major American automakers routinely sell more cars in a single weekend. In 2009, a British businessman named Jimmy Heselden acquired Segway Inc. Heselden was a self-made entrepreneur who had grown up in poverty in Leeds and built a successful manufacturing company producing gabion barriers used by military and civil engineering projects worldwide. He believed in the Segway's potential and invested significantly in its future. Less than a year after the acquisition, in September 2010, Heselden died after accidentally driving a Segway off a cliff at his estate in North Yorkshire, apparently while trying to make way for another rider. He was 62 years old. The company changed hands again in 2013, when Ninebot, a Chinese personal mobility technology firm, completed an acquisition. Ninebot would go on to become one of the most commercially successful companies in the global electric scooter market, but it achieved that success with products that looked nothing like the original PT, and at price points a fraction of $5,000. On July 15, 2020, Segway Inc. announced that production of the original personal transporter would permanently cease. The line was discontinued quietly, 19 years after its heavily anticipated debut. The reason was straightforward. By that point, the PT accounted for less than 1.5% of the company's total revenue. The Segway story is frequently told as the story of a failed gadget, but that reading misses the more instructive lesson. The Segway was not a failure of technology. It was a failure of market assumption. Cayman and his backers made a series of individually reasonable-sounding predictions that collectively turned out to be wrong. They assumed that a sufficiently good product would change human behavior at scale. They assumed that cities would adapt their infrastructure and regulations to accommodate a superior form of transport. They assumed that consumers would pay a significant premium for something genuinely useful. What they underestimated was the combined weight of existing infrastructure, existing habits, existing regulation, and existing social norms. None of those things yielded to a clever machine. The electric scooter market that emerged roughly a decade later proved that the underlying idea was not absurd. Millions of people are willing to use a small electric vehicle for short urban journeys. But those vehicles typically cost $25 to buy outright rather than $5,000. They are light enough to carry up a staircase, and they require no unusual posture or particular self-confidence to operate in public. Being right about a technology is not the same thing as being right about its form, its price point, or its moment. Dean Kamen did not disappear after the Segway's commercial disappointment. He continued inventing, continued building, and remained the driving force behind FIRST Robotics, the international program that introduces students to engineering through competitive robot design. He continued working on advanced prosthetic limbs and portable water purification technology. By most measures, his life's work has made real and lasting contributions to the world. But the Segway became something he could not entirely escape, a symbol of the distance between a great inventor's vision and the reality of what markets, cities, and human behavior will actually support. The machine worked exactly as designed. It balanced. It moved. It delivered on every technical promise its creator made. The world simply did not want it badly enough, at that price, in that form, at that moment. There is a harder question sitting underneath all of this. If John Doerr had been wrong about the Segway, and Steve Jobs had been wrong, and some of the most experienced and intelligent investors in the world had looked at something and declared it would change everything, and it hadn't, then what does that tell us about the next time someone says exactly the same thing? Thank you for watching. If you've enjoyed this content and want to see more, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel.